This is historian Stephen Ujifusa, and this is the Wet Lunch on the High Seas podcast. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my own love and pursuit of history and what I've learned in my many years as an independent historian. I'm a believer in what Scott Galloway of NYU Stern recently said: don't do what you're passionate about, do what you're good at. And it's all about competitive advantage. I've always had a knack for history and writing, but I didn't have one in finance. That being said, I'm glad I took finance classes when I was in graduate school at Penn, as that grounding has given me the practical skills necessary to found my own company and write histories of corporations. The trick for me is using my knowledge of human nature and business to tell good stories, whether it is in trade books or on commission. I would also tell people who are starting off as writers to find your own tribe while also minding your individual soul. Surround yourself with a group of smart, ambitious, and kind friends who will support you in good times and in bad. Fellow writers, of course, but also people in a variety of other fields. Also, find a mentor. For Barons of the Sea, that person was Llewellyn Louis Howland III, an old-school Yankee book editor who blended sharp, irreverent wit with intense literary discipline. When I hit a creative brick wall with Barons of the Sea in 2015, it was he who suggested I reverse engineer my book about clipper ships into a dynastic story about New England families such as his and the Delanos. I called him my clipper ship rabbi. Above all, find a partner who will encourage and push you to keep going. Being a solo operator in any field is tough, and you need to find someone who can get you out of your own head at the end of the day. My wife is an emergency room physician, and she deals with life and death every day. Not only is she hyper-organized, but also provides much-needed perspective. I started my career as an independent historian in 2007 when I sold my first book. I'll confess that I have had my own share of false starts and failures as a writer. I've learned the hard way more than a few times. You have to be tough to survive. Life can kick you in the pants no matter how much you plan. Now my philosophy is that to succeed as an independent artist, one must be unsentimental and clear-headed about blending art and commerce. If Bach and Mozart had to do it, so do the rest of us mere mortals. Unlike Bach, I only have 2 children to support, not 20. I also believe there's a huge hunger among the American reading public for good storytelling. And if we cannot educate our society about history in an engaging and ultimately empathetic way, we are in deep trouble as a modern liberal democracy. Each one of my 3 books was a progression for me, a learning experience in which I tackled more and more complex subjects. My first book was A Man and a Ship, America's Greatest Naval Architect and His Quest to Build the SS United States. It was published in 2012. As my first attempt at narrative nonfiction, I wanted to start off with what I knew best, namely the story of the great transatlantic liners and a single pivotal figure, William Francis Gibbs, who overcame many obstacles to design the greatest and fastest of them all. The SS United States, completed in 1952, was the culmination of a dream and was an American mid-century Gesamtkunstwerk, a seamless blend of aesthetics and engineering. For 17 years, the ship ruled the lucrative and prestigious North Atlantic passenger route, but the arrival of jet travel made her obsolete. The book was a story of drive and will, about Gibbs's pursuit of excellence in the face of misfortune and societal disapproval. He flouted the strict conventions of his upper-class Philadelphia childhood. After growing up in a pampered Gilded Age Philadelphia household, William Francis Gibbs was confronted with a horrible embarrassment. His father lost all of his money in a series of scandals and financial catastrophes. William Francis Gibbs would later say that he never would have amounted to anything if his father had not gone bankrupt. This event, which happened when William Francis Gibbs was a senior at Harvard, made William Francis Gibbs decide to go off on his own path to become a great naval architect. And also that the promise of security and societal expectations of being a proper Philadelphia lawyer were false and not for him. Even as an old man, however, even after he attained success as a naval architect, he had a picture of his family's childhood mansion in Rittenhouse Square, demolished after his family lost it in 1910, hanging in his bedroom as a reminder of what once was and what he had transcended. Ultimately, what lasted and mattered a lot more was not the mansion on Rittenhouse Square, but the ship of dreams that he built in 1952. My second book, Barons of the Sea and Their Race to Build the World's Fastest Clipper Ship, was released in 2018. What started out as a story about the Boston master clipper ship builder Donald Mackay grew into a story of dynastic global capitalism. The owners of the swift, beautiful mid-19th century clipper ships were the Jeff Bezos of their time, using new technology and more than a little ruthlessness to transport goods such as tea, opium, and silk from one side of the earth to the other. Among the leaders of this tight-knit group of American businessmen was Warren Delano II, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's maternal grandfather. The book also gets to the roots of America's complicated and fraught relationship with China, something that we are still very much dealing with today. My third book, The Last Ships from Hamburg, Business, Rivalry, and the Race to Save Russia's Jews on the Eve of World War I, can be described as a sequel to Fiddler on the Roof. Fleeing Tsarist Russian persecution, the Jewish milkman Tevye and his family leave the Russian shtetl of Anatevka for America. We don't know how he and his family get to America, however, not at the ending of the play. My book peels back the onion on a story that, for the descendants of the 2.5 million Jews who left the Russian Empire between 1881 and 1914, is often shrouded in a code of silence. They sold everything they owned and said goodbye to everyone they knew, all to flee violence and military conscription. It was a gamble, a 5,000-mile journey over land and sea that involved illegal border crossings, railroad trips in sealed trains, and transatlantic crossings in the airless bottoms of grand luxury liners. The logistics of this complicated and profitable business were facilitated by three men: Albert Ballin, the German Jewish leader of the Hamburg America line; J.P. Morgan, the banker and shipping magnate who tried to monopolize the immigrant trade; and Jacob Schiff, the investment banker and philanthropist who gave away millions of dollars from his own fortune to help Jews escape Russia and settle in the United States. This story of mass immigration is especially relevant in today's landscape, as is rising anti-Semitism worldwide. Each book was an education for me. My first book was about how to pursue a dream. The second was how to make a fortune. The third was about how to change the world. Nothing always went according to plan in the writing and research of each of these books. As is much of life, it is like sailing a sailboat rather than piloting a motorboat. You set a course and you keep on tacking and adjusting course depending on which ways the winds blow. Such as with sailing, such as in life. This is historian Stephen Ujifusa, and this is the Wet Lunch on the High Seas podcast.